be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
It's going to be very popular.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube. You would have an enormous Schwanzstube.
Enormous.
You would have an enormous Schwanzstube. You would have an enormous
Hey, how's everyone going today? My name's Quinlan. Welcome to Melbourne Musos Facechook Live. Ooh. And there we have it. Okay, what I'm talking about tonight is being very popular. Okay, so what we've got there. All right. So what we've got is odd times and polyrhythmic playing. I got asked through the week about Tool again. Danny Carey, one of the greats and all that. So I'll just talk a little bit about polyrhythmic playing and polymetric playing. That's what I was sort of just doing then. I had a little bit of a riff there. It was a bit tongue-in-cheek, I suppose. But here's a little riff that I've got on my sampler. And what it is, I'll get stuck straight into it. It's popular. What happens is you've got a nice little djent. And what happens is if I played evenly, right? So if I just did the old rock bit, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4, like so. Okay, that's something else I'm going to do. I'm going to leave them on. Here it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's going to change. See? Just change. Changed again. Now, what we've got there is something that Tool does, King Crimson does, and even when you're dealing with different kinds of beats, sometimes what goes on is that the drummer, right, will keep a straight beat while other members of the band are doing a different time signature. I keep coming back to a tune, the title track of Police's Synchronicity album, because it's in 6, but it's sort of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. It's got that beautiful little lilt about it, and you see it. So what goes on is I could count to 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. I better turn them off, hadn't I? I'm going to use them later on. I'm just going to talk about a little bit of soundtracky business as well. So what goes on is when you're doing these kinds of things, one of the things that Stuart Copeland from the Police used to talk about. Now here I am talking about Tool, prog rock, King Crimson, with Robert Fripp, which is why I've got them, and all that sort of stuff. And what have I come back to? I've come back to one of the most popular bands in popdom, the Police, and Stuart Copeland, one of the great drummers of popdom, and all that sort of stuff. And what goes on is that it was always a thing that I've always sort of remembered. He was getting an interview, he was being interviewed, and the interviewer would ask about odd times, and he said, "Oh, don't worry about them." And he said, "What do you mean you don't worry about odd times?" "Well, they come back every second bar." And he's right, because if I go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, it's back, you see. I'll go 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 4, 5. There you go, you see, that's what goes on. You see, so what happens is that when you're dealing with rhythms being laid on top, you've got two ways to do it, you see. You can have a polyrhythm, and so what happens with a polyrhythm essentially is 2 beats played against each other, with the most common one being 3 against 2. Okay, so nice cup of tea, nice cup of tea. Both right, left, right, both right, left, right. You see, that's what goes on there. Now, when you're doing that, that's a 3 against 2. But what you can also have that was a polyrhythm, 3 against 2 polyrhythm. What you can also have is a polymeter. So what I was just doing then was polymetrics, okay? And that is the art of 2 time signatures being played against each other. There's a famous one that Frank Zappa does, and he's got the old mothers of invention, and he's comes up to the microphone and he says, "Drummer A," which is Jimmy Carl Black, is playing in 3/4. Drummer B, which was Artie Tripp III, who ended up playing with Captain Beefheart, essentially is playing in 7/8. Okay, so right there, 3/4 against 7/8. Okay, there you go. Bass player is playing in 3/4. You know, keyboard player is playing in 6 and all that sort of stuff. And the saxophone player is blowing his nose. And that was Ian Underwood doing all his Ornette Coleman and all that sort of stuff. So what can start to happen is you multi-layer different time signatures. You know, the old Zappa Instrumental did that actually one night. It was funny. It was great, you know, sort of thing. And when you're dealing with numbers like that, it gets pretty big. I mean, and this is part of what happens with Indian music and all sorts of stuff. You layer rhythms on top. And really what you're doing is you're doing basic maths. How are those maths going for you all at home out in there? You know, home learning, online, everything. I'm doing all right over here. The joint's a mess now, but, you know, I've got little cameras and iPads everywhere. So what goes on is you can do anything at all. So, you know, like if I'm just playing a rock beat, you're not always going to play an odd time. What can happen is you can play a certain series of bars, and that's what this little djenty riff is all about. So if I... and it'll change. See? Just then. But we're staying the same, aren't we, drummers? Angus. Abby who? Normal. Abby who? So I hope you got something out of that. Anyway, you know what that is? A drummer passed away a few weeks ago, and he's an ex-King Crimson drummer, Bill Rieflin. And I did a little tribute a couple of weeks ago. But in doing all the research, he was the drummer for Ministry. And I hadn't listened to Ministry for years. And it was the start of industrial metal. Rammstein, went from that. And you remember all that? New World Order, and sort of one more fix. One more fix. Down. Jesus built my hot rod. And all that sort of stuff. Oh, it was brilliant stuff. And I went, there you go. So that was a little bit of a thing with Ministry, I suppose. Like you've got a little bit of djenty stuff going on, but it's different. It might be 8 bars, but the last bar is in 3/4. Okay, so that's what happens with polymeter, And I thought, well, why not throw a bit of the old Young Frankenstein in there? I could do... Oh. I am Fra. So it gets me going every time, that beautiful film. Okay, now, when we're dealing with things like this, what starts to happen is that you can go all polyrhythmic, hence the reference to Danny Carey early in the week. Nick, I think it was you, mate, as I remember, but there's a Danny Carey clip of, was it Numa or whatever, and on the Vic Firth website and all that, it's brilliant. And what he does, and the whole thing about Tool, one of Tool's great quotes is, if we can end up sounding like King Crimson, we're happy. And they do, that kind of thing. So hence triggers and stuff, because Danny Carey uses a lot of triggers. And what I'm trying to tie in is soundtrack stuff, because one of my favourite composers also went to the great concert hall in the sky the other week in Krzysztof Penderecki, or Penderecki, the composer of the most scariest movie music in the world. The funny thing about his movie music is that he didn't write any. He was a serious classical composer that was used in some of the most famous films like 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Exorcist and all that. So I've already done another little show about that, but I'm going to wrap it up with the polyrhythmic kind of thing that I've been asked about. Can you hear that? Three against 2. So that's the 2. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Polymetrics again, because that's a 5. 1 2 3 4 5. 1 2 3 4 5. 1 2 3 4 5. 1 2 3 4 5. So what that is a 3 against 2 polyrhythm, but the 2 is a 5. I think I Gina Lola Bridget did in there. Sorry about that. It is live. the things I've also talked about in the last couple of weeks, I suppose, especially with some of my colleagues, is the term xenochrony. And that's a Frank Zappa thing, who was also big on his polyrhythmic business, because xenochrony is the art of taking something completely separate, like a recording. I mentioned Serge Ermol the other week, who used to do this, a Sydney pianist, and what it was you'd take a recording from one place and slap it on top of a recording from another place. And that's how Frank Zappa managed to put together his Shut Up and Play Your Guitar series, right? Now what's going on here is that I picked a tempo to play to, but did you notice that the going on is the samples itself, the echoes has its own tempo as well. And last year I did a thing about that, because with this particular program there's no setting on the echo, it's just that speed, and the speed is 120. It's half a second, okay, and it defaults, because on the laptop it defaults to the clock, so it's half a second, you see. So if I'm playing, say, 80 beats per minute, let's say. Okay, so what it is 60 against 80, okay, and that's what goes on. 6 8s are 48. So it'll come back over 480 beats. This is where Indian tabla and work on a lot. So what you've got to try and do is, with all of this, find a common denominator, find the resolution point. So what will happen, what I'll do now is I'll talk about the hi-hat a little bit. In many cases, what goes on is that when you're actually playing stuff, I'll turn that off just for a second here. What goes on especially in jazz circles, there's that sort of saying, leave the hi-hat for the rest of the band. So you Now, if I took the hi-hat out and just went, okay, that's all well and good, but the thing is, what locks it in is the hi-hat. There it is, there, you see, that's what goes on. Now, what happens is, what would happen if I just went, let me see, if I just played crotchets, so 1, 2, 3, 4, so, and then I put in triplets. So what I do is go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and like that. What do you reckon? Okay, get it? Got it? Good. Okay. One and a two and a three and a four and a. What happens is I'm actually listening for that. You see, the hi-hat. The idea of it, though, is you get things on automatic. Now, things that we think about on automatic are things like, say, groupings, like semiquavers, you see. So if I'm doing then put the triplets in. That was a bit of a screwed up paradiddle, but I was going to go into a double. I went two-minded there. But what happens is there's the triplets, 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. So my hands are playing a single stroke roll. Semi-quavers, groups of 4, 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and my feet are playing triplets. And that's what goes on, you see. So what happens is that as you're going stir crazy in isolation and you're playing drums and you're going nuts, as you can plainly see here, what's going on is that you're able to put different polyrhythmic things together. Now, there's a thing that I used to call the organic polyrhythm. And what that is essentially working on what I was just talking about. When you're doing a polyrhythm, you take the two numbers, you multiply the two together, and say if you're doing 3 against 2, you multiply the two together, you get 6. And to get the 3, you play every 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then when you want to get the 2, you play every 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that ends up being a 3 against 2 polyrhythm. Now what goes on is that as the notes get more and more elaborate, like a Tool and like a King Crimson, like a Frank Zappa, all of this business, it starts to, extrapolate out to other things. And now Frank Zappa used to talk about things like nested polyrhythms. And this is the essence of the Black Page. No, I'm not going to play it tonight. I've played it already in past shows and all that sort of stuff. But what goes on is that you can have your 3 against 2, but you can put quintuplets inside the 3, do you see? So you could have, what am I going to... So, nice cup of tea, nice cup of tea. No. And that's going to what Danny Carey does to a certain degree, because he might have that, let's see, he might have that triplet. And what happens there, and one of the things about that clip is something that I talk to my students about. I was just doing it the other week with Harley McCurley. How are you, mate? Doing okay? There you are. All right. You can get polymetric things even with a single stroke roll, like that. Now, let's use our tom-toms a little bit in getting all that going. So if I just picked 4 drums, like snare drum, tom 2, 3 and 4. So in essence, I'm playing a square, right? There's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Then That's a little bit of the Clint Eastwood style of playing drums. A man's guts to know his limitations. And what goes on with that is that the left hand is just staying on the snare drum and is the only one doing the doubles and the accents, because the right hand is just playing the square. Left hand comes in. That's what goes on. But what I was actually talking about, if I'm going to do 4 there, why not do a 3 here? So 1, 2, 3, you 1, 2, 3, like that. You see. Now we're getting into Danny Carey territory here. Okay, so there's that one. Now you see where I'm heading there, but I'm just going to take one step back and essentially now reverse roll. So I'm going to keep my right hand just on the snare. See, there's a 3 there. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And how come I haven't got this on? I meant to do that. Ah, there you are. These are Erhu echoes. And Japanese violin and all that sort of stuff. I actually have, I'm going to go a little bit fancy on you here. I've got that set to an overtone scale. You know what that is? That's a Mahavishnu Orchestra kind of a deal there with John McLaughlin and stuff. That's where I first learnt it. And an overtone scale, if you're just taking the C major scale, you sharpen the 4th and you flatten the 7th. Okay, so some of you out there might say, if you sharpen the 4th, isn't that a flat 5? And it is. But in the realm of the scale, it's a sharp 4. It's an F sharp. And you take the flattened 7th. So essentially it's like a C7 kind of chord with a sharp 11. That's the resolution of the chord. And then I put it onto Erhu violins with echoes. So it gets fully sick there. There's the 3. Can you hear the shuffly? There's the square. Oh, Danny Carey, how do you do this every bloody night? God help me. You know what all this is? It's oh, oh yeah, I won't be angry. Abby who?
Abby who? And you will be angry.
I won't be angry.
Be angry. Abby someone. Abby someone. Abby who? Abby no.
Don't know what that was. Abby who? So I better start wrapping the show up if I haven't scared you off already. And what goes on here? When you're dealing with these kinds of things, you have a world of hurt. You also have a world of music at your fingertips there. Now, did you notice that when I was doing the 4 and the 3 there, I'll put the snare drum back. Oh, where am I doing? There's xenochrony right there, really, because the echoes are working in a different place than my tempo here. Say ba ba da ba ba da ba da ba 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 ra ba ba da ba 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 ra ba 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 ba. And can you hear the melody coming out? You see, you're pulling out actually accent patterns, and this is another thing that tools sometimes do. I often wonder whether the band composes things where you might have Danny Carey doing one of these insane polyrhythms that they get into and all that, polymetric things. And the guitarist is working off his right hand, and the bass player is working off his left hand, and Maynard in the middle is working the bass drum or something like that. Now, Captain Beefheart Band with Trout Mask Replica used to do that. Ron E. Smith, how are you, Ron? You doing all right? You sent me a doozy this week to put drums to. Wow, I did have a ball doing it though. But anyway, what I'm getting at is when you're doing different things like this, sometimes you might have one member of the band doing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and the other member of under. And that goes back to the jazz thing where you might have the hi-hat for the band. And there's the tempo of the echo, you see. Now that goes all the way back to Frank Zappa. Because what goes on with Frank Zappa, with the xenochrony business, is what he was able to do was take peel tracks off. Like you get Terry Bozzio to do one thing. I believe it was in 11, Rubber Shirt, off of the Shake Your Booty album. And what it is he got that, and Patrick O'Hearn, the bass player, did something else, and then Frank did the solo over the top. I should be better researched with that, but that's how I remember it. So you can get different things. And now, to finish off, that's why I'm doing soundtracky business, because you could have a movie soundtrack where the one theme might be in 3/4, the lovely lady swimming away, you know, and then the shark turns up. There's the shark over there. Shark's the right hand. There's the lovely lady having a little swimmy poo. She's trying to get away now. She can see the fin. Sharks turn into 5-4. What a show this is. Anyway, I hope you got something out of it. I better wrap it up. I'm off to an essential service. My mate Long, the man of 2 slaps, if you know what I mean. If you read my post from the other week. So, I think, Nick, thank you very much. You asked me about Danny Carey, which prompted me, all right, well, here we go. You know, how the hell does he do all that? You know? Man's guts to know his limitations. You got me to wondering, did I do 6 polyrhythms or only 5? Well, seeing these are Promark PST1 soft mallets, I lost count during all the confusion. So tell me, do you feel lucky, punk? They toll for thee. What's he building in there? I'm coming for you, Murdoch. Oh, damn, that's that famous poet. What's his name? Season in Hell, Magda. Arthur Rambo. Let it go. Let it go. I could have killed you all, but you took first blood. Let it go. Thank you very much for watching this crazy kind of an episode here. Thank you. So my name's Chris Quinlan. This is a stupid, crazy first anniversary of Facechook Live. And I've missed one. I fell asleep during Christmas and I didn't do one. So this is the 51st episode. And I thought, why not? And thank you to everyone. Marcus, Andrew, Stephen, Tochi, Scott Hayward, everybody's asked me questions over the last year. I thought I'd do a crazy one for you. I did get asked about Danny Carey. So I hope I've done a little bit about polyrhythms for that with you, Polymetrics. And I'm off to get a beer from Long.
Thank you, Doctor.